All right, so without waiting any further, any longer, Jon Villanti's got a wonderful background. I asked him what he did for a living before he started doing his CISO cyber work, and he says he was authorized to push a red button and blow things up. He was an Air Force pilot, served our country. Thank you, sir. And he's currently the Chief Information Security Officer for Allegiance Bank, and he's got a whole bunch of things. And he said, I don't have to read all that, but I think his talents will speak for themselves as he goes forward and shows us a live hack. As soon as he's finished, probably give out another prize, and then we'll go eat lunch. How's that sound? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jon.
It's on.
We'll wait for them to get my slides off my computer. We're going to talk, we've heard a lot about MFA today, and I saw a lot of hands go up when we asked about MFA, which tells me that you're on a journey towards zero trust. You've either embarked upon it already or it's near term for you. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to hack zero trust. Specifically, we're going to hack MFA. We're going to bypass MFA using 3 techniques. You were told earlier, use MFA. I'm going to show you a few things for additional consideration today. We're going to reimagine identity. I work at a very regulated company. Read this. If anybody was here in 2018, you'll know why this slide exists. This is what we're going to talk about. So I was really encouraged to see a lot of hands go up because these are scary stats, and I'm glad to see that Houston is doing better than the 3,000 technologists across the US and the UK who responded to this survey. The fact that 3,000 technologists, we're not talking run-of-the-mill type of office workers, these are people who identify as technologists, and they don't know what MFA is. It's kind of terrifying. The other thing that really stands out to me is the use of a password manager by such a small number of people. If you think about the number of accounts that you have, and you're supposed to have unique passwords for every account, how could you ever have a 25-character randomized complex password for 25 accounts and remember all the passwords? You can't. You have to use a password manager. So what this tells, what does an attacker see when they see these statistics? They know if they can get a foothold in an environment, they can reuse the same credentials across many accounts and they're probably going to work, or they do a search for star password star because it's in a password.txt file. Those passwords are stored insecurely in a spreadsheet or a Word document. So these are the things that I really want to help people see things through the lens of an attacker so that we as a collective raise the bar. We as a collective force the attacker to chin a higher bar. So it's kind of, this is probably revisiting identity for all of you. But when we think about zero trust and identity, it really boils down to a question we have to ask ourselves. How do we restrict access to apps and data only to the users authorized to do so? And it's not a straightforward question. And in cyber, we're never going to get to a 100% answer, but maybe we can get to 80%. The answer typically, for the past 20 years or more, has been username and password. Well, we know that doesn't work. We know that people are reusing the same password across multiple accounts. We know that people give their passwords away in credential harvesting attacks. Adversaries then sell those credentials on the dark web, and they're pushed around in credential stuffing attacks to gain access to different resources. Passwords alone are ineffective. In comes MFA. So in the concept of MFA, a password is something that we know, and we see the other factors of authentication. So what we're saying is something that we know, a password is insufficient without an additional factor of authentication, something we have. Probably everybody in here has some sort of an authenticator application on their phone, possibly 3 or 4. that will convey a one-time passcode that rotates based on time. Maybe it gives you a push notification. That's an example of something that you have. Maybe it's an SMS conveyed one-time passcode. Biometrics, we have Face ID with Apple phones. That's something that you are. Then there's location, some place you are. Maybe you're logging into a resource from a trusted IP address location, or perhaps there's geo IP fencing that would prohibit a connection from certain IP addresses. So we're made to believe that MFA layered on top of a username and password is the answer, and we're all set. Maybe not. We have to reimagine identity. And the reason we have to do this is because of the webification of everything. The browser can be a tremendous attack weapon. We heard some people here today talking about technology and what money can buy and sophisticated hacking tools. The browser's not very sophisticated, but it's an incredibly powerful hacking tool. So if we think about web apps and we look at this list, all of these solutions have been webified. You get to them through a browser. They're on the internet. It's cloud. It's SaaS. And if you look at some of these bullets, the ones that really stand out to me are the ones related to what I would call the day in the life of a cybersecurity engineer. Get to work, fire up your laptop, launch your browser, open up a number of tabs to see, jump into your EDR console, take a look at your secure email gateway, take a look at your DNS filtering stats for the past 24 hours, take a look at web filtering, and you get those dashboards up. Gain situational awareness. Hey, I'm drinking my coffee. I've got my dashboards up. If the boss comes in, I'll have an answer. That browser is now a gold mine for an attacker. This user is not a domain administrator. They're not a local admin. They're a low-privileged user with a ton of browser tabs open that can do tremendous damage. If I'm an attacker and I can gain access to that EDR console, what do? I create an exception for the SHA-256 hash of the custom malware that I've written that I'm going to get into the target environment. I go to the secure email gateway. I make sure that emails sent from my sending domain make it through. If I put a link in, I'm going to create an exception for URL rewriting. There's going to be no examination of the URL that comes in. And I'm good by using DNS filtering tools and web filtering tools, I'm going to make sure that any outbound calls I make to my command and control infrastructure out on the internet make it. I will have interactive control of the target environment. I'll be able to download a stage 2 dropper, run it, and the best antivirus on the planet isn't really going to complain. Scared yet? That's the power of the browser. Why? Why is the browser forcing us to reimagine identity? It's the protocol itself. Hypertext Transport Protocol is stateless. It's sessionless. It has no concept of a conversation. It's a lean, mean object brokering machine. It's told to get something, it gets it, it delivers it, it's done. The session's torn down. Every request has zero knowledge of a previous request. They're fully independent, which means if I give my username and password to Amazon and then they authenticate me and I send a GET request, they don't know who I am. They're independent requests. I now need to retransmit my username and password with every single GET request that I send to Amazon or every single post. Well, it doesn't sound very secure. You're going to put your username and password inside of every single GET or post? That's not good. So how do we get around that? The application itself. The web app has to establish the concept of a session. It does this with a cookie. Most everybody here knows that. But what really is that cookie? And when does it get conveyed? And why is it so important? The cookie is created by the web server. It's sent to the browser, and the browser knows I have to retransmit this session cookie to the server with every single request. It's a re-verification of my identity. Let's think about that. Re-verification. The cookie is set after the user enters a good username, a good password, and they've solved MFA. The session cookie bypasses MFA. All I have to do is steal the session cookie. Is that true? It's a theory. And this is what a cookie looks like. This is specifically, we're going to deal with LinkedIn today. But it could be the EDR console, it could be the mail filtering console, DNS, secure email gateway, travel and expense reporting system, anything that's been webified. So we're going to look at the power of the cookie. And the first thing I'm going to do is simply prove it to be true. We have a theory, and I think it's really important in cyber that we create the positive. Right? We create the condition that we're solving for and bear it out to be true. You can do this with a number of different tools and in a number of different situations. So I call this the power of the cookie. Now, when I do this at my home office, I'm usually wearing shorts and a t-shirt, so we'll see if I can type wearing a suit. Username, password. Okay. You see failures like this when you're doing a live demo on the internet at someone's location where you've never connected before. If I had an extra hand, my fingers would be crossed. So the premise is that I've logged in with a valid username, a valid password, I've satisfied MFA, and I'm going to have a valid session cookie. So once again, I mentioned this Uber hacking tool called a browser. We're going to go into developer tools. You hit the F12 button to get to developer tools. You see I'm here in application, I'm in my cookies, I'm at LinkedIn, and with a little bit of research, I know that this is the cookie that I'm interested in. So I'm going to copy it. And I mentioned earlier, and I showed in a screenshot, the construct. This is essentially a JSON blob. I'm going to take this JSON blob, I'm going to import it into a different computer, running in a different browser, and see if I can bypass MFA. Copy and paste is a very popular hacker tool. So here I am. Now I'm going to dump my cookies. I'll delete all my cookies here so you don't think there's any games going on. You can see automatically the server kind of resets some others. Now this cookie, a session cookie, doesn't hit your hard drive. It lives in memory. It's a construct that's in memory. So unfortunately, I can't like break into a machine and then just go and grab that cookie file, which is typically an SQLite 3 format. But I'm going to paste that JSON blob right here. I'll import the cookie, and I'll refresh the page. It's a little slow. We're running off of 4G MiFi. We've just bypassed MFA. The theory's true. So now we know one of the things we have to do is protect our session cookies. How do we do that? Basic cyber hygiene. Shocker. Now, if you look at the 2021 Microsoft Digital Defense Report that was released in April, it's a 134-page document. On page 124, it's going to tell you the 5 things you need to do to achieve basic cyber hygiene, and according to them, it stopped 98% of the attacks that they saw come across the bow. If you superimpose some of these basic cyber hygienes with the Center for Internet Security, it's going to stop approximately 78% of the attacks that were discussed in the latest Verizon Data Breach and Investigation Report. What does that tell us? There's a lot of numbers. Basic cyber hygiene still matters. So if you're a repeat attendee and you feel like, hey, I keep hearing about this, it's not because it has lower value, just that it continues to be true. All right. Let's talk about another security control besides basic cyber hygiene and protecting our endpoints from getting hacked in the first place. So I'm going to shut down the developer tools, and I don't know if anybody goes to malwareunicorn.org. Pretty cool site. You can learn how to reverse engineer stuff, learn different injection attacks, and turn it somebody else's bad into your own good. But I've got this open. I'm just going to shut down. I don't want to be on LinkedIn anymore. I'm going to go about my business. All I did was close my browser tab. So let's come back to this essentially unauthenticated attacker. They can keep moving around. Well, maybe they're going to look for an entry-level cybersecurity job. I hear there's a lot of people hiring. That tab isn't open. Why is that? Why do you think essentially the unauthenticated browser on a separate computer can continue to access resources in LinkedIn using the original session cookie? How can it do that? I just closed my browser tab. What happened?
Each it will be separate.
Say that again?
Each request is separate, so it doesn't matter where you're coming from.
Actually, what happened, Andy, is the session cookie still lives in memory associated with the running process. In this case, it's Google Chrome. So the cookie attached to the process still lives. It's still open. It's a valid session. So even the other machine can still run that cookie. Now, good friend of mine, look at that picture, George. You'll see him later today. Log out. Don't close your browser tabs, please. Log out. The session cookie was just torn down. The session is no longer valid. We can prove that to be true by coming over to essentially the attack machine. And let's go to skill assessments. I want to see, does John know how to bypass MFA? Look at what we get. It's gone because that cookie is no longer valid. So that's the first bypass technique for MFA. I'm going to move to a different technique. I'm going to need to get this thing set up just a little bit and type this really long password again. Hold on. Has anyone heard of Burp Suite? See a few hands, good. So Portswigger, they make Burp Suite, and I have an account with them. So we're going to use one of their labs because as you might have heard before, I don't attack real targets anymore. This is going to get to the topic of vendor management. We heard people talking, Andy was talking about questionnaires and things of that nature. Vendor due diligence is important. And what we're going to see here is a bypass of MFA that I essentially call a leapfrog. And I'll bring my PowerPoint back up so we can talk a little bit about leapfrog. Normal authentication. We get to a page. We're expected to enter a username and a password. We hit enter. What happens? We get a second page. We'll call that login 2. We enter our MFA on the login 2 page, which then brings us to our account. We can think of it as a 3-step process. Page 1, username and password, satisfy the requirement. Page 2, MFA, satisfy the requirement. Brings us to page 3, which happens to be my account. If I say I'm going to perform a leapfrog attack, which I don't know if this exists, I just made it up last night, what am I going to do? What am I going to jump over? I'm jumping over the second authentication requirement. I'm just going to pretend like it doesn't exist. I'm checking for poor implementation logic by the people who wrote the authentication subroutine. That's what we're going to do. Just because something exists doesn't mean it works, And just, there's all sorts of corollaries and dichotomies in our world. Never believe that just because something works the way it's intended to, that doesn't mean you can't break it. That doesn't mean they've tested it properly. In this case, I have phished a user. I do have their credentials. I don't have MFA. To test this, I'm going to use valid credentials, step through the process, and I'm going to observe the address bar and to see if what was in the PowerPoint proves out in real life. This is that second page that I mentioned, login to. So they're emailing me my code. So this is terrible. You never want to get your MFA via email. Also, certainly a 4-digit security code. So very easy to brute force. Using Burp Suite, there's an intruder module. You can brute force this. There's only 1,000 possible combinations. You start at quads, 4 zeros, and the highest is 9999, 1,000 options. Not very time consuming to brute force. So here I am, I'm at my account, I go up to the address bar and I see the actual my account. So this is what I observe as a hacker with my legitimate credentials. I know I phished Carlos and I want to log in as Carlos to see his stuff, but I don't have the MFA piece. So I'm gonna try to leapfrog it. I don't know if it's gonna work, but this is what hackers do, they just try stuff. Okay, I'm here at login 2. I know I can't get MFA. Maybe I can leapfrog. Maybe the people who wrote the authentication subroutine messed it up. Logic flaws. MFA has been bypassed. 0 hacking skills required. How do we defeat this? Vendor management, due diligence. You have to think about what kind of data am I putting in this platform, how sensitive is it, and that should drive the breadth and depth of your due diligence efforts. A SOC 2 Type 2 report is a good starting point, but you pay a lot of money for those reports. I've never seen a bad one. It doesn't tell the story of how secure your data really is going to be. That's why a lot of companies have these questionnaires, because the root of it is, how are you protecting my data? Oh, we encrypt it, everything's fine. We encrypt it at rest, we encrypt it in transit. Huh, TLS 1.1, great. Things like that, right? So you're gonna get answers that sound good on paper. You're gonna get answers that check the box. I know a hacker, Mubix, he calls himself a certified box unchecker because he can find all the checked boxes on the compliance reports and still bypass everything and hack in. All right, we're gonna get a little bit funky now. Okay, well, we are gonna steal a cookie. I talked about it earlier. I said it's hard, it's in memory. I'm gonna get it in transit. To do this, you build an attack infrastructure and you proxy the connection. So we're gonna use a man-in-the-middle advanced proxy. Here's what it looks like. We phished a user. They're gonna interact with my infrastructure on the internet. And I'm acting as a reverse proxy. I'm gonna tear down that session, I'm gonna rebuild it, send it over to LinkedIn. I'm gonna capture the username, I'm gonna capture the password, I'm gonna capture MFA all in flight. I'm gonna make a copy of the session cookie, and I'm going to boot the user to Google. They're gonna think they made a mistake. I do that on purpose, just because if I send them to LinkedIn, it's just not enough a disparity. It makes people scratch their head. So this is what I'm gonna try and do. I've spent a lot of time doing this. I have registered a lot of new domains. I've been caught by Google, DigitalOcean. I have many domains that are now on a blacklisted, poor reputation database. And I definitely struggled to slide under the wire at the 11th hour with this one. I need someone to cross your fingers on my behalf. There's a tool, you can go to GitHub. It's called EvilJinx 2. There's another thing called EvilGoFish, which is a little bit better, but I didn't have time to figure it out. What's worse is that there's now something, and you guys read all about this, maybe through CERT a couple weeks ago. There's Evil Proxy. Proxy is a service. For $400 a month, you get this type of functionality in a GUI control panel on the web, and you can cause havoc for $400 a month. So smart people write the tools. Smarter entrepreneurial people turned it into a service, and now anybody with money and an internet connection can create harm. That's kind of one of the depressing things. I'll also say another depressing thing. You know, there's people that are GRU, SVR in Russia. They wear uniform. They're part of a cyber unit. They are nation-state threat actors. They go home, they take off their uniform, and they're part of ransomware gangs. We actually are facing nation-state level attackers, even though we don't know their nation states. Organized crime is crazy good now. So what I'm going to do, short story. I'll attach my domain to a fishlet, because I'm going to fish somebody, set up my fishlet, then I'm going to create a lure, and I'm going to set the lure. Essentially, it's a URL that's going to redirect them to my proxy, hopefully fetch that LinkedIn page, ask for a username, password, and MFA. And you'll see me struggle through opening up my password manager again. So even though, you know, my fish sent them to www.HoustonCyberSummit.xyz, which is a non-existent domain, by the way, I was able to take that request with my reverse proxy. I ran out to LinkedIn, I grabbed the real page. So I don't need to do any page scraping in advance and set up fancy infrastructure. Got redirected to Google, so I think something's wrong as the user. However, all authorization tokens are intercepted. Let's go see my sessions. This is session 11. Look familiar? So there's a number of ways to bypass MFA. For this one, how do we stop it? You need to train your staff so that they understand that even though they think they're going to LinkedIn.com, if they hover over that link, they're going to see, in this case, HoustonCyberSummit.xyz. Those two don't match. They should not click that link. Obviously, there's going to be, let's say I registered this domain a week ago. You should have some sort of either web filtering or DNS filtering that can understand what a baby domain looks like. If a domain was created 90 days or less, it's a baby domain. It could be dangerous. It needs greater scrutiny. Also, you know, obviously we had an outbound connection to someplace over port 443. No one here is going to stop that outbound 443 attempt at the firewall. So it really is to augment training. I don't know how many people here do routine testing, phishing testing. It's a great thing. Users don't like it. They get caught. But one of the things we do at the bank is we've really established a culture that says, I'm not here to get you, I'm here to help you. And I'm here to measure resiliency. How resilient is your organization to the types of phishing emails that are actually making it to your company? So if you look at some of the major themes of phishing emails nationally, those may not be hitting your organization. Based on the line of business that you're in, you could be getting a different theme. It's almost like when they're building the vaccine for the flu and they want to get the right strain built and distributed and everyone gets their shot. When you're training users, it has to be the right strain of phishing, the kind that you actually get. So this is where your own SOC can create internal intelligence that informs the folks doing your phishing exercises. And if you have a small team, it's the same person. So that really is helpful. That's all I have for you today. I'll open it up to any questions. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I certainly hope that you're enjoying the summit. There's been some great panels. And I know that I'm standing in between you and lunch, but we can call this Ask Jon Anything. Have any what?
Has any SOC people has stopped you with when you were trying to help out a company?
So I've been on some pen tests, and first, we physically broke into a building. We stole a bunch of laptops, and we were able to compromise those laptops and then pivot into the network. And no SOC teams have been able to stop. And then once you get a foothold in the environment, if you behave maybe like a user instead of an attacker, live off the land. There's an entire GitHub site. I think it's called LOLBAS. It's living off the land type things. People aren't tuning their SIMs to catch adversaries with post-exploitation activities. So a normal user doesn't type, "Who am I?" or net users or net local group administrators. Normal users aren't typing vssadmin.exe trying to look at all your volume shadow copies because they're preparing to delete them prior to releasing ransomware in your environment. These are things that we can all do. Now, if you're running a SIM and you're wondering, wow, Jon just said some really good things, can I get those techniques baked into my SIM so my SIM can alert? The answer is yes. And it's called Sigma. Sigma is a project that I think of it very similar to Snort, right? So even if you're running Suricata, you can still run Snort rules inside of Suricata. Snort's kind of the de facto standard as far as the syntax on the rule. Well, what Sigma has done is that, well, there's ArcSight, there's QRadar, there's Elastic, and there's a bunch of SIM products that have alerting capabilities. Maybe we can have a vendor agnostic language, and then they can convert this vendor agnostic alert into their platform. So Sigma is kind of the project. Sigma C is the converter that will take all of these interesting techniques and map it into an alert language in your SIM. And Sigma they're doing their best to map to the MITRE ATT&CK framework as well.
Thank you.
Do you want to, have you researched or talked about how a customer, a client is working? I'm working at a corporation, and instead of going to LinkedIn, I go to PayPal or my bank, and how that cookie is also, or the user credentials sometimes are similar to the corporate credentials, and how to protect that.
Yeah, so if I heard the question right, are you asking about somebody who reuses a personal password at work?
Exactly, and how often is that for?
It's really hard to measure because we don't have access into the personal lives of the people that we work with. We ask them not to do it. If you don't have in your password policies a statement that says you shall never reuse a personal password at work, or you shouldn't reuse the same password for any single account, you should probably get it in there, but it's very difficult to measure. And it's difficult to measure the passwords that they're using in these web apps as well. The thing that's really in our control is the network password that they set inside of Active Directory, because we can have an admin get us that Active Directory database, and then using tools from Impacket and even just John the Ripper or Hashcat, we can start cracking passwords. And even if your organization doesn't like to crack passwords due to privacy concerns, you can certainly do an analysis of the file hashes. You can pull those out and you can see if maybe, let's say there's an admin, they've got their normal user account and they've got a privileged account. You can do a really quick analysis. Are they using the same password for both accounts? Because it'll have an identical hash. And that's also a huge no-no, because now an attacker can pivot from low privilege to high privilege using the same password. Oh, yeah, here we go. We got to stump the dummy going now. It's Pierluigi.
There are actually tools that we use for dark web monitoring, we call it. So if the password leaks on the dark web, you can use them internally mostly as teaching tools, teaching moments. I've had situations where my clients found bank email addresses and passwords leaked from things like Facebook or other personal or other accounts that should have been private. So these users did it even worse. They also used their company email to create a personal account. You can't do anything about that other than you found it, you change the passwords, and you use it as a profound teaching moment to remind the user that they shouldn't be doing that. Because sometimes you talk and talk and talk and you teach and you preach, but people just don't listen. I do have a question for you, though.
I thought you were going to stop there, and I was just going to say thanks for the info. If you don't know Pierluigi, he's probably the smartest person in the room.
No, you are. But I do have a question for you. Quick. Are you familiar with Quick? QUIC.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is that we are trying to stop all this stuff with the HTTPS, and then Google comes up and decides that now we're going to go around it with a protocol that right now cannot be stopped. Because the only thing you can do is block the port and not let it work at all. I don't want to put you on the spot there, but if you have an opinion, I want to hear it.
I share your opinion. It's something that needs deeper investigation to learn how to stop it. So this is a different protocol, and there's not a lot of firewall admins who probably know it exists or how they can filter on it and stop bad things from happening. I don't have a good answer for you, Pierluigi. Yeah, but then does it, I've not tried that, so I don't understand the implication of breaking the app.
It forces it to revert back to HTTPS, which means goes back to cyber hygiene that we always talk about. You correctly said at the beginning, it's very important, it's not a joke. People that still trust the LAN and leave everything open are very vulnerable to this problem. If you configure your cybersecurity properly, then you can block it. But that's really all you can do. You can block it, not filter it. There is no one in the market today that I know of that can filter it properly and allow it to work securely. And I have no idea why Google had to come up with this protocol. It just baffles me at the moment.
Yeah, so what Pierluigi has raised is a great question, and he's helped to increase our awareness collectively about this protocol that Google invented and it's in use that's essentially supplanted HTTPS, and there's not a lot of knowledge about it, how it works, or how to stop it. So expect some vendor speak and buzzword bingo surrounding that protocol. We're about to get more phone calls. I don't know how many phone calls people in this room get from vendors on a daily or weekly basis, but I think Pierluigi just gave us a glimpse into the future of some of the different narratives we're going to hear. I think we might have time for one more question. Phil.
Hey, we do have a little bit of time. Lunch is not quite ready. So if you have some questions for some of the other panels that were up here earlier, some of them are still in the room. And, raise your hand and then we'll get you a mic and we can ask Jesse or any of the other guys that are still around. So go ahead. Go ahead, Phil.
Hey, thanks. No, John, great presentation. And, I'm religious about MFA, so it's always good to scare me. But this is an observation I was frustrated by. I'd love your opinion. We use Office 365 for our email. And in there, we use multi-factor authentication on it. But if you want to use a phone app to access your email, they give you a tool in the admin side of Office 365 to generate a token, which is basically another password. So you're back to single-factor authentication. So I'm like, why would Microsoft have an MFA tool that you can easily bypass yourself?
Yeah, I didn't know about that, or I probably would have demoed it. So thanks for letting me know about that. You've given me a little bit of a homework assignment. Microsoft, a lot of tech companies build things with backwards compatibility in mind, or for the user, creating less friction for the user. I can't explain why they did that, but you spurred something in me, because I was thinking, why wouldn't the developer of a web app link the cookie to a source IP address? That could stop the replay of a cookie, because it wouldn't be, the attacker, let's say, is in Wisconsin, I'm sitting in Houston. And I think the big answer would be, well, what about mobile? What if someone's jumping across towers and their public IP address is changing? Maybe that has something to do with it. And then, of course, my mind takes me to, well, you could just look at the user agent string and determine if they're mobile or not mobile and enforce different rules. So what I'd really encourage people to do who are defenders is to be creative and to think, right? To draw out, what does that threat map look like? What do you think you're really defending against? Where are they really going towards, and how are they going to get there? Maybe this isn't an attack path for you. I think it is. The web's everywhere. But it really does make us rethink and get creative as defenders. I always say that attackers are only as good as their creativity and competency, and they have a goal. So they're very creative, and they're just very persistent. They keep going and going and going. As defenders, we take the approach of, well, we have to defend against all the things. They only have to get it right once. We have to get it right all the time. That's not necessarily true, because there is an attack path. Right, we've all heard about the cyber kill chain. Well, they have to get it right every single step of the cyber kill chain. Every step in that kill chain is an opportunity for us as defenders to defeat them. So a little bit of a soapbox moment.
Just one incident. One of the ways that you protect the cookies is using the UUID of the computer, because the CPU is unique. So if you are using the same code from another computer, even in the same office, it doesn't work, even though the IP address is the same. So there are ways to create cookies that are self-protected. The problem is that very often we don't do it.
They don't do it.
And go for the lazy approach.
So we talk about lazy, right, as defenders, and Jesse, I see you. As defenders, right, the attacker's really persistent, and they'll stay up for hours and hours and hours. As defenders, we want to go see our kids, our spouse, a significant other. So there's constraints we have as defenders that attackers choose not to realize.
Hang on just a second, Jesse. Y'all are leaving. You're not going to win the Amazon card I'm giving away. So that's why I'm holding everybody hostage until 1 minute till lunchtime.
And it's a big number, right?
I'm just letting you all know. Susan, my peer, calling her out.
And it's the big number, right, Mel? It's the big number, the big amount.
Number, right, big
amount. John, always a pleasure. We actually had Elizabeth and the lawyers ready in case you did get arrested today, trying to hack into something, so we're good. No, the question I have for you, you mentioned a little bit the dark web. One of the things that a lot of times we get approached by saying, hey, we found a bunch of credentials on the dark web. Your team has been compromised. Your company's been compromised. Can you talk a little bit about like what you believe or what you think about checking the dark web for data dumps of credentials? What advice would you give to folks when they start hearing that, hey, some of your stuff is out there on the dark web, and how secure can we get to the dark web? Because there's still a little bit of a kind of confusion of what the dark web is, and you mentioned it briefly earlier, but just again, how serious is it when someone tells us, hey, we found some credentials on the dark web?
If you're, a manager, CISO, director, and you get some piece of information telling you that potentially your company's at risk, you have to do something about it. So now the question becomes, how much credence do I put on the data that I find in the dark web? And we won't know until we test. Just like today, will cookie theft work? I don't know, let's test it. So I would take any of that data dump information, I would look at who my pool of affected staff are, understand, do they come from the same region? Are they from the same department? Did they join at about the same time? Do they have the same benefits elections? You know, maybe a third party got breached. And so now if you log into Blue Cross Blue Shield with your corporate email and your password, and Blue Cross Blue Shield gets breached, that data's out there on the dark web, but you didn't get breached. Now the question now, if they're reusing that same set of credentials across multiple accounts, we've got a problem. So immediately I would have those users change their network passwords. I would really talk to them kind of off the record and say, listen, if you're using the same password from that anywhere else, you just need to change it. And I want you to change it right now. And you know, I've gone through some user stories. We all have user stories where you ask someone, "Did you do this?" No, I didn't do that. Oh, because here's the screenshot of the website that Okay, well maybe I clicked the link. Did you give me your username and password? No, I would have never done that. Do you use the same password on your online account or your brokerage account or anything else at home? I might have given them my username and password. Yeah. So we'd have them change their username and password on the network and across critical web applications. This is where MFA does come into play, though. Listen, these attacks, they work. We're in a real controlled environment here. To make all this stuff happen in real time over the internet, it's a bit more complex, but guess what? I'm not really a hacker, so the smart people are much better than me. And then I would continue to monitor. Now the question becomes, well, should I sign up for a service? Because people are going to be calling me up and saying, we monitor the dark web. We can help identify chatter that hackers are having about your organization. We can find dumps of stolen credentials. Now the question becomes, how much am I willing to pay for that? How does it impact my budget? And how does it align to the defenses that matter the most to protect my organization? And really now it's part of a risk assessment type of a process.
Okay, let me go ahead and let y'all know that lunch is ready. So I'm going to go ahead and draw one, but we'll take one more question and then we'll go from there. Thank y'all for being patient with us, and I'll ask Reva to give me a number here. This is 744. He got it? Okay, we had one more question, maybe one or two more questions.
Oh, can you hear me? John, super presentation. This is Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah, fantastic presentation as always. You just knock it out of the park. You started the presentation with a discussion on passwords and password managers, and one of the issues with password managers is that there seems to be a lot of resistance with looking at these cloud-based versions. And you hear stories of, in fact, I know for a fact that a bunch of them have been compromised. So any quick recommendations on password managers and how to convince people to start using them?
I hesitate just a little bit to provide a very specific recommendation as to what password manager to use, but I would say that there's two flavors. There's password managers that are going to create an encrypted database. It lives as a file on your hard drive. Those passwords live here and here only. So if I don't have this computer in front of me, I won't know what my passwords are. Personally, I don't know any of my passwords. I have my password manager generate them automatically. They're at least 25 characters in length. They're randomized. They include all the complexity you could think of. All I have to do is remember my master password. There's other password managers. OnePass, I think it's called OnePassword, and LastPass are examples. And I know you didn't want to say a name, but maybe one of those two had a problem within the past year. They will synchronize that encrypted database of passwords across multiple devices. Now, the marketers of those companies and the SEs will tell you that what the password does is it essentially provides access to the key that's used by the crypto to unlock the encrypted database storing all of your passwords. So the assertion is that the master passphrase is what stands in between hackers and all your passwords. Now, what can we do to mitigate the threat from an OPSEC perspective? Let's say we have I want 25-character passwords, I would set my password generation rules to generate 24 passwords. And my password database now contains a bunch of 24-character passwords, and I have secret sauce. I've got Jon's algorithm. And I know that I fast forward 10 characters into the password and I type in a specific number or letter. Every single password stored in my encrypted password manager is not actually the password to the site. I've got secret sauce. Even if somebody has my password manager, they don't know what I do to layer in those additional things. So that's a mitigation effort, Peter, that makes you not really have to wonder so much about that. Just a thought, right? OPSEC on everything.
Okay, thank you. Any quick questions? If not, let's break away for lunch, and let's be back around 1:15. I'll try to get everybody together around 1:10 so we can start our next couple of sessions on time. Thank you.